My arrogant sister is announcing she's getting married to some rich dude the same day I announce I'm getting divorced. She did that on purpose just to spite me. Well, you know what? This story has a lot of details, and it gets progressively crazier. Let's jump into it.
Never live your life to please anyone. You would never earn the sincere gratitude of some people, even if you were to offer your head to them on a platter. This is coming from a woman who has been scorned on all sides. I grew up with my mother and my younger sister Amy. I had a sense of responsibility from a young age, and I did not waste any time on, frivolities. I felt the need to stand on my feet so I could carry the financial burden of the family on my shoulders. This made me strive towards becoming an independent woman at an early age, and it was so serious that I turned 30 without having the thoughts of marriage cross my mind. I just devoted my life and time to my mom and sister. I got a great job and began living on my own while trying to encourage Amy to follow in my footsteps. My mother thought she commended me for how I've been focused on life so far. She advised me to pay attention to my love life. I began entertaining suitors, and it was not long before I crossed paths with my husband, Roland. Roland is an engineer by profession. And though when I met him, he was not handling many contracts at the time, I was impressed by the fact that he was a hard worker like me. So I tried my best to connect him with a few friends who were helpful to him. Roland proposed to me, and I said yes. I introduced him to my family, and I made sure that they did not know that I was one carrying the financial load. Our wedding was a blast, which folks turned about for weeks, but though 90% of the money was from my purse, I always flaunted my husband as the doer. I did not let my marriage to Roland stop me from assisting my mother and sister, although I must confess that it was not easy, especially since my sister lived an expensive lifestyle and would make lazy attempts at earning her own money. She just lived with my mother and caused her one problem after the other. One such occasion was when I was with Roland during the weekend. My phone rang and I had barely answered the call when my mother began laying all manner of complaints and demanded I show up at her place immediately. I cut the call and informed Roland that I needed to go on my mom's place ASAP. Though I did not know the reason for the summon, I had my suspicions though. So I get to my mother's place, and it was just what I felt it was. My mother was having another bout with Amy. Upon inquiring, she noted that Amy had taken a certain amount of money that she left in her room. Amy did not deny the allegation that our mother had laid on her. She rather questioned why our mother would be ranting and just breathing out threats when it was not an outsider but her daughter who had taken the money. You can see how entitled my sister is. Rather than earn money to join me in taking care of our mom, she was busy stealing the one that I've given her. I asked why she had behaved that way, and she did, and she noted that she needed the money for something urgent and knew it was a waste of time, begging our mom for it as our mom would not give her. I felt angered by her behavior and reaction. I gave Amy enough money to cater to her needs, and she had no right whatsoever. Before I could say anything, our mother began threatening to get Amy arrested, while Amy ran her mouth and claimed our mom could do nothing. I intervened by scolding Amy, and I told her that this issue would not have arisen if she was an independent woman who sponsored her exorbitant lifestyle, though, through the money she made. Amy cut me off before I could finish what I had to say, and the words that flowed out of her mouth were both surprising. My own younger sister rebuked me by asking me to shut up. She claimed I was only able to portray myself as an independent woman so far because I had my husband's wealth to support me. According to her, the reverse would have been the case if I was unmarried like her. I did not take the rebuke from Amy lightly. I knew that her opinion and notion of my husband being rich was based on the pictures of him spoiling me with good things of life, which were littered all over my social media space, but I didn't say anything about that. I simply clamped back at her for being disrespectful and rude. I reminded Amy I'd been taking care of her and our mom right from my days as a single woman, and even if I had my husband's wealth to lean on, it's not a crime. I, however, pointed to the fact that even she was married to a hard-working man. He would quickly get tired of the marriage because she had no value to offer. Maybe it's not right for me to have said such words to my sister, but I don't know, I think she deserved it at the moment, and I went further. I warned her that if I ever got a complaint from our mother regarding her, then she could kiss any form of help from me goodbye. I got home that day and my husband Roland wanted to find out what the issue was, but I dismissed it as nothing. This was shortly after we had gotten married, and I was still keeping him in the dark about the family squabbles. I didn't want the great image that he had about my sister to just be tarnished. I mean, come on. Amy had no doubt hurt me, but she was my sister and I still loved her anyway, so even after I had threatened her, I took some time to think about what happened. I knew if I left situations the way that they were, then a repetition of another issue with our mother was bound to break. So I made the painful decision of increasing the money, which I gave to her by 30%. The weight of things began taking a toll on me shortly afterward. On one hand, I was taking care of my mother and sister's needs, while on the other hand was my husband's needs, which were now becoming too much. Roland had become overly demanding, and I had to take from my savings just to meet up. It, however, got to the point where I could no longer keep up with this when my marriage began to experience a bit of turbulence. I turned down my husband's request for some money twice in a row. As I genuinely noted, I did not have it then. He was initially understanding, but soon began pressing me to borrow from wherever I could. This suggestion to borrow did not sit well with me, and I told him right away that there's no one that I could get from. Roland, rather than bear with me, suggested that I take a loan, or borrowed from my younger sister, who, well, he felt was an independent, single, rich lady. I told Roland that taking a loan was a bad financial decision, and I could not get it from my sister at the moment. I left out the part where the lady, whom he was asking me to meet, was depending on me. Roland said nothing. He just walked out on me and avoided me like the plague. So I confronted him later on to make him see the reason. I brought to his notice that we were a young couple and need to save. I noted that I had exhausted my savings while trying to meet current demands, but my husband simply said that I was being unnecessarily stingy and unsupportive. His statement somehow managed to stir up anger in me because the only thing I've ever done since I met him was, just to be a supportive partner. I asked him what would happen if I became an expectant mother and we had nothing to live on, and Roland said he's not sure that he's willing to get a child with me. He stormed out of the house and I did not see or hear for him for days. I knew he was hurt, and I partly blamed it on the fact that I withheld in-depth information about how I spent the money which I earned, but all the same, his reaction spoke of ingratitude, and Roland came back home and still was not talking to me. I got fed up with the tension in my home, and I decided I was going to go spend a few days with my mother so I could give my husband space to cool off, get my mother updated on what was going on, and equally obtain her advice. So I got to my mother's place, and my younger sister Amy was coincidentally going to spend a few days outside the home, but in her usual fashion, she did not see the need to tell us where she would be. Well, my mother had gotten used to her arrogant lifestyle, so she didn't even bother asking. She was more at peace each time my sister was away from the home. I did not tell my mother the reason for my visit till the third day, and when I did, she asked that I open up to Roland just to let him know how the money I earned was being spent. I told her it would mean he would learn about Amy's true financial situation and reluctance to work, but my mother said my loyalty was first to my husband and my marriage. Before even her and my sister, of course, and she went on to state that the important things like these needed to be communicated properly with your lover. She noted that my husband would understand better if I simply explained it better. I saw reason with my mom's advice and promised to discuss with my husband the moment I got back home, but you know what? I never got the chance. I was preparing to go back to my husband's the next day when someone came to my mother's house to deliver something for me. My mother brought me the documents, and I wondered who would have sent me documents as only my husband knew I was at my mother's place. I lazily opened the parcel and discovered that they were divorce papers. My husband was divorcing me. I was shocked and could not say a word. My mother, who had been by my side out of curiosity to know what the documents had come from, was even more shocked by my reaction, and she got scared when the tears began to stream from my eyes. My mom quickly picked up the documents that had in my hand, and she went through them. The moment she discovered that they were divorce papers, she turned to look for me, but I had already run out of the house to go look for Roland. My mother ran after me as she was not sure what my reaction would be, honestly. I didn't know what my reaction was going to be. All I knew was that the whole thing with Roland was most enough for him to divorce me on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. I got to the house and he was there, and upon seeing me, he asked if I had gotten the papers, and he was serious about it. I pleaded with him and asked, please, we should not let our marriage end like this. It's so young. But he noted that he could no longer stay married to me. My pain transformed to anger as I began asking what the irreconcilable differences were, because to me all of this was because I did not give in to his demand to borrow money. Roland just asked that I respect his decision, and it further angered me. My mother, who was already at the house, had to intervene to stop me from creating a scene by telling Roland to talk things over with me, but you know what? Roland refused. Roland told my mother that I was no longer ready and willing to play my wife's role, and he was done with the marriage for good. So I immediately flared up and asked what the wife's role were that I had neglected, but he didn't say a thing. I did not expect him to, because money was the bedrock of this divorce from me. My mother took me out of the house to avoid further tension, and she planned on coming back herself to talk to Roland and see if she could even salvage the situation. I cried when I got home, and my mother tried to calm me down. How could my husband, whom I've made so many sacrifices for, just turn around and tell me that I was not doing it? My younger sister walked into the house and asked what's the problem. My mother told her that I've been served divorce papers. You would expect my sister to drop whatever grudge she had against me and console me, but she made a sarcastic comment about why there's no point for me to cry since I was such an independent woman. I heard her statement, but was not in the mood to reply, and her mother, however, rebuked her for being insensitive. Amy did not relent in taunting me. She went ahead to tell my mother that we would finally see the truth which she had been saying all along, the truth about me claiming to be a woman of value when it was my rich husband's money that I've been living on all along. My mother was losing her patience at this point, but that did not deter Amy from taunting me. She went ahead to announce to my mother and me that she was engaged to her rich fiancé and they would soon be wedded. The expensive ring on her hand was proof that she was not lying. Well, her situation did not make any meaning to me, as the only thing I thought about was my marriage, which was on the verge of collapse. Our mother immediately asked my sister to pack her things and leave the house, and my sister was not moved. She told my mother that she had already thought about leaving the house, but as regard of her things, she did not need to take away any. Her fiancé was going to give her a real makeover by getting her new stuff, and this was how Amy walked out of the house without anything and did not look back. My mother went back at a later date to appeal to Roland to reconsider what he was about to do, and from the report that she brought back to me, Roland did not even allow her to say a word. He told her that she would still be a very important person in his life, even though he was going to be divorced from me. He even asked that she persuaded me to accept the divorce and speed up the process. Amongst the reports that my brother had come back with, the thing that caught my attention the most was the fact that my younger sister, Amy, was living with my husband, Roland. My mother noted that she did not bother asking Roland what my sister was doing at his house, but he just explained that Amy was staying at his place for a while. My mother said nothing, but we both knew something fishy was going on between them. Amy had walked out of the house without anything, but she was pretty comfortable when my mother saw her. Besides, it was only logical that she would go to the house of her rich fiancé. My mother asked what I was going to do, and though I was pained at the betrayal from both sides, I finally resolved to accept the fact that my marital status was going to change after my discovery. I would not go back to Roland even if he was now willing to make peace. I believe Amy and Roland don't know themselves. They're projecting themselves to be things which they're not, and it would be good to watch the whole thing blow up in their face. If Roland is my sister's rich fiancé, which I suspect he is now, then the expensive engagement ring that he's gifted her was probably from the little money he still had left. And knowing who he is, I know he did that just to impress. So I called Roland and informed him that I wanted the divorce proceedings over very quickly. I could tell he was elated with my decision. Our divorce hearing would be in a few days, and though I know I can make a case by accusing Roland of marital infidelity, the proof is not so strong yet. I have other things in mind. I would give him his divorce, but that would not be all. Update number 1. Amy and Roland have finally made their intentions known to my mother and I. You could tell from the time frame of their announcement and me signing the divorce papers that they've already put things in place and were just waiting till Roland was officially a divorced man. I did not step foot into the house where Roland and I lived after the divorce. I went straight to stay with my mother while I thought about the next line of action. My sister and my ex-husband visited my mom and me a week after the divorce, and they came as a couple. My mother and I were not surprised, as we had our suspicion all along. My mother and I were both seated in the parlor when they walked in because they had informed my mother of their intended visit and had requested my presence. Roland was the first to speak, and he started by saying the initial stage of our marriage was great, but it turned out that I was not the one for him, and there was no point living his life in misery by pretending to still love me. He said that he had come to discover his love for Amy when our marriage was experiencing a crisis. He tagged the problem we had as a blessing in disguise, as it opened up his eyes to the fact that my sister was his soulmate. I wasn't surprised because he had equally called me his soulmate when, the going was good. I kept quiet but looked intently at the two backstabbers as Roland spoke. After he was done with his speech, Amy took up from where he stopped. She asked that neither my mother nor I should hold any grudge, and just in case we did, we were to direct it towards love, as love was to blame for the situation. Our mom, who could no longer hide her hurt, disappointment, and anger, she snapped. She called Amy's wickedness out and blamed her for the disillusion of my marriage. Well, in my opinion, Roland is responsible for it, as Amy is too. Amy told our mother that she had come to the house to invite the both of us to her wedding, which was in a few days' time, as they wanted to do it quickly, and she was only doing so as a show of peace, but it was clear that we were pained by the situation of things. Our mother replied by telling her that she would not attend such a wedding, where her second daughter was getting married to the first time to the ex-husband of her first child who was still alive. Our mother immediately asked him to get out of her house, and while they both stood up to leave, she told Amy that she was dead to her, and Amy replied saying, "The feeling's mutual." Amy noted that one of the reasons she had come around was to ask Miss Independent to come take her things out of the house which she would now occupy after the marriage. My blood expeditiously boiled with anger for obvious reasons, but I remained calm for reasons that were not known too. I replied that I would be coming around after their marriage, and don't feel bad for me. Having Amy and Roland out of my life is such a good riddance. Too bad for the rubbish. They would be getting married in a few days, and though I won't be attending, I would have a wedding gift prepared for them. Update number 2. Amy and Roland have finally gotten their wish, and they married. I'm positive that they're not soulmates, but I'm equally sure that they're deserving of each other. The wedding was a very loud and lavish one, and Amy made sure that the whole world heard about it. She did all this because she wanted to spite me for recreating memories that were better than the ones Roland and I had when we were married. She uploaded images of being spoiled rotten by her man, and Roland equally made uploads of her royal treatment he was given by Amy. He noted that he was lucky to have found someone so lovey, who was much more beautiful and wealthy than his first partner. Above all, he noted that his current partner, my sister, had a heart of gold and was willing to share her all with him. I was pained by the way Roland had betrayed me, but I laughed it off because he was subtly making the reason he had divorced me. It was simply because he felt my sister was more wealthy than me. If only he knew that my sister had depended on the money she got from me, and that the one she stole from our mother to keep up the wealthy image she was displaying to the public eye. I know that they were probably spending the money that they had realized from the wedding, and it was only a matter of time, short time that is, before they realized that they were two broke people who saw the others as a means of poverty. After they got back from their honeymoon, Amy began sending me a series of abusive text messages where she asked that I come take my crap from the house or she was going to have it thrown away. I finally went to the house, but I did not go alone. I went with a man. So I got to the house, and Amy began running her mouth and looking down at the man that she saw with me, simply because he was dressed modestly. She felt he was my man and was not rich like her husband. I responded by congratulating her and Roland on their new hot marriage. I told them that the man who was with me was their wedding gift, and they looked really confused. So I went ahead to clear the confusion pretty easily by informing them that the man was an interested customer who wanted to buy the house in which they were living. Roland asked if I was insane, and Amy responded by saying I was, otherwise I would not be looking for someone to buy their house when all they asked for me to do was come take my crap. Amy said that they were not looking to sell the house and asked me to leave the premises with my buyer. So I called to Roland's attention that the house was in my name, silly, and if he had not been in a hurry to get divorced, he would have read where it stated clearly that I retained ownership of any property which I owned. I've been looking for interested buyers ever since I made up my mind to grant Roland his desired divorce. Roland said I'm just talking rubbish. He and Amy threw out my things and noted I had no other business coming to the house. Well, thankfully, among the things that they threw out was the deed ownership document I kept with me. I would be talking to the police. Update number 3. Hey guys, it's me again. I reported the matter to the cops and I produced the deed of ownership as proof. I now had the law behind me, and after it was established at the police station that I owned the house, I had the option to kick Roland and Amy out with the help of the police, but it was too soon, and I did not want it to be me who made the call. So I reached out to the customer who I've taken to the house, but he was offended because of the embarrassment he suffered the last time. To make up for it, I offered to give him a 30% discount. If he still wished to buy the house, of course, after taking a look at it. My proposition pleased him, and he noted that taking a tour around the house was not necessary, as he was ready to make the payment. His actions did not surprise me, as any buyer would jump at 30% off opportunity for a home. We hastily drafted up legal documents, and within a few days, the deal was done. We then paid a visit to my ex-husband and my sister. The moment my sister and her husband laid their eyes on us, they wanted to get violent, but guess what? Here came the cop escort, and they intervened. They began telling the police that they were trespassing on property, but the cops stopped them halfway by asking them, okay, prove it then. Provide the claim that they were making, but you know what? There was no proof. Amy was greeted with the fact that the house was bought in my name, and this was something Roland had known but initially chose to ignore. I then went on to tell them that the house had been sold, and the new owner was the one who would decide what to do with them. Roland was trying so hard to find his words, but before he could say anything, Amy quickly spoke for both of them and noted that even if it was true, they would simply get a better house than mine. The new owner of the house immediately gave them a 2-week ultimatum to vacate the building and property, and Amy boasted that they only need a few days. Her sharp tongue. It made him recant his statement, and he now told them, okay, they just have a week to get the heck out of the house, otherwise he'd see to it that they're thrown out in shame. I know neither my sister nor her husband has the money to buy a house or even rent an expensive one, so I just can't wait to see what they come up with. Update number 4, final update. The latest couple had a serious fight, which they are not going to recover from. Let me tell you about it. The man whom I sold the house to reached out to me 2 days after the deadline he's given Amy and Roland was up. He noted that despite the boast of my sister that they're going to be moved out in a better house in just a few short days, they were still, living in his place, and it didn't look like they were ready to leave. I encouraged him to do the needful, which was making a good on his promise to forcefully eject them with the police. I only asked that he allowed me to witness the whole drama, and he was okay with it. So, he took the police to the house, and I was part of their company. Roland did not want to open the door even with the cops outside, and you know what? That's on him. That was an offense. The cops made a forced entry and the door was broken down. They took my sister and her hubby right out of the house and were in the process of bringing out their stuff when Roland turned to Amy and said she's the cause of all this. He said that they would not be facing such embarrassment if my sister had just returned the expensive ring that he had used to propose to her. Amy reacted by calling him a shameless, lazy man. who, rather than work like his mates to secure a good life, wanted to paw away at the pretty ring he used to propose to her so they could just rent a house. Upon hearing what my sister said, Roland simply said that she had no right to call him shameless and lazy because they were the same. The exchange of words continued, and before we knew what was happening, Roland pounced on my sister and began to beat her. I'd known that there would be drama, but I never expected it to be such a magnitude, so I pulled out my phone and you know what? I clicked record. The cops, who were initially focused on throwing their things out, were now forced to play the advocate. But this was after Amy had gotten a swollen face. Amy swore with her life to sue Roland for battery. I left the scene shortly and got to the house, and while I was still showing our mother the video, Amy showed up with a swollen face. She asked to be allowed to take her stuff, the very one that she said that she did not need. Mom and I suspected she wanted to sell it to raise some funds, and Mom told her that her stuff had been discarded, thrown away in the trash, even though that was a lie. Amy then pleaded with us to let her stay for a bit, but we refused, and she had, to leave in shame. I guess she would end up selling the ring after all. That witch would learn to be independent the hard way.
Wow, this story was crazy. I think the most delusional person has to be OP's sister, but that doesn't even come close to mean that she deserved to be beaten like that at the end of the story. I mean, what's wrong with this guy? It does turn out, though, that OP's ex-husband, he basically got everything that was coming towards him. And I do want to know what you guys thought about this story. Maybe you know someone who's been in a similar situation, but I don't know. This story was so wild. I doubt it. Anyways, let's talk about it downstairs in our comment section, guys. My name's Mr. Reddito. If you guys are new to the channel, I want to welcome you and just let you know that I narrate stories every day. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upcoming video. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.